So we are going to our next and also, unfortunately, our final panel for today. And people are popping in. I see, again, a couple of friends here that I've been knowing for quite some time. Awesome, you guys are with us. And we also got Matthew back, who is going to be moderating this panel on how to prepare your studio for M&A. Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much. Yeah, hello, welcome, one and all. So here we are. So one about how to prepare your studio for M&A. That is the title track today, and we've got lots of great panelists today to deep dive into this topic. So what I'd like to do first of all is to introduce everyone. So my name is Matthew Forde. I'm the deputy editor at PocketGamer.biz. You might have seen me earlier today on another panel for getting the most out of your investment deal. But now we'll hand over to our panelists. If we start off with Christopher, if you just start a bit by introducing yourself, your role, and give us one of your favourite games. I always like to ask people that.
I don't know if it's a favorite game or more of a favorite game franchise, but Chris Bergstresser, I've been in the games industry a really long time. I've been on the development side and then moved to the dark side of business. Up until quite recently, I was Chief Operating Officer of Enad Global 7 or AG7, running the M&A side, but also sort of on the operations for integration and onboarding. And right now I'm focusing on being a board director at Flexion Mobile, which is a games tech company. But favorite games franchise for me is Phantasy Star. It will always be. It's gonna take a cold day in hell before I change my mind on that.
Solid pick. Thanks for having me. Romain, what about you?
Hi guys. Yes, thanks a lot to bring me in. So Romain, I was a former CFO at Voodoo, and I joined Homa Games 6 months ago as VP Finance and Legal to run our M&A efforts. I think that's why I'm here today, as M&A has been identified as a core growth driver for the company. And regarding my favorite game, I would say Clash Royale. I spent many minutes, hours, and days on it, and that's why I uninstalled it a couple of months ago, as it was too heavy and too much time on it. So I think if I keep pushing on it, I will have some trouble with my wife. So that's why I stop it, and I hope I will find another game such promising as Clash Royale.
Very popular choice, yeah. Shum.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I'm Shum Singh, the founder and MD of Agnitio Capital. Agnitio Capital was founded in 2003. We're London-based, but also have an office in Moscow. We're your traditional M&A advisor, and we've been focused on the games industry for quite some time. We've also made approximately 15 investments in studios over the years. You can just visit the website to get an idea of some of the investments we've made, a lot of the companies we've exited and sold to the likes of Stillfront, Embracer, Ubisoft, Nexon, Gree, et cetera. In terms of games, and I think you're going to probably get a picture on my, or at least close to my age. I'm more of a console player, so I've always been a massive fan of GTA, the kind of culmination of gameplay, cars, and 80s retro music. I mean, that's you can't ask for anything better. That's just such a winning formula.
Yeah, they are incredible games, and unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get getting a new one for quite a while still, are we?
Well, that being said, I heard a rumor that Dan Houser is setting up a new company.
You never know. So yeah, maybe something else in that vein.
You never know.
You never know. And Jesus.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jesus. I'm the founder and CEO at Starloop. It's a game development studio that I founded like 10 years ago, and we exited Starloop. Well, we sold the company to a private equity in 2019, almost 2 years ago, and now the company was acquired again by a bigger group, Magic Media. It's a group oriented to outsourcing services in the game development industry. So that's why I'm here essentially, because of that experience probably. And also, well, my favorite game, I really like match 3 games in general. Homescape is probably one of the ones in which I have spent most time. I personally haven't been playing, but yes, probably one of my favorites. Yeah.
Very good. All solid picks. So let's get into the main topic for today. So let's address it head on. What would you say are the best practices to prepare your studio for M&A? So I'm going to go to Shum for this first.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a pretty loaded question, Matthew. So, you know, you're talking to an M&A banker for 25 years. I'll just, you know, make some broad strokes here. I think, you know, there's never been more appetite in the industry as now. And I think, you know, with all the companies that have gone public recently, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years in Scandinavia and Poland and the UK, there's even now all these SPACs, and then now renewed interest from private equities, you know, companies looking to, you know, really get aggressive and consolidate as well. So you have all these different sets of acquirers out there. So there's never been a probably more fortuitous time to be a smaller, rapidly growing developer, whether you're on the PC premium side or even, you know, mobile free to play. So I think, you know, just setting that context is great. But I think one thing that I've seen personally, and I always try to really try to, you know, hit home to a lot of founders is most of these studios are composed of game founders. So you might have a tech lead, you might have an art director, you might have a PM, you might have a, you know, executive producer, and that's fantastic because that's the core team you need to create a fantastic game, and that's great. Nothing wrong with that. But I think once, you know, the business has evolved, it's grown, it's expanded, then I think often one of the major functions that's lacking is the business side. And so they don't necessarily have that internal business savvy, financially fluent, sophisticated individual who can represent the best interests of the founders and articulate that effectively and even work with a bank to then run a process, which then hopefully is going to culminate in a successful result, not only for the shareholders, but will also expedite the process. So again, I just wanted to keep it high level.
Christopher, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, in my, you know, I've done, I guess, 25 or 30 transactions, let's say, you know, 80% on the buy side. But and you know, just sort of looking from both angles, where it's fallen apart most of the time, especially early on, is companies that just do not have their finances together. And I can't emphasize how critical it is that you get a good finance director at some point. If you're really thinking of M&A, get a finance director, help them pull all that information together in a readable way. Because, you know, what you don't want to do, and the other component of that is getting a good banker behind you. But that banker will tell you the exact same thing, is, you know, they don't want to spend 6 months trying to get all your finances together. Get a finance guy in there to do it. And I would say that certainly in my experience is where the process has unraveled most of the time.
Yeah, good advice. Jesus, what about you?
Yeah, from a studio founder perspective, yeah, I feel aligned with what has been said. When we were acquired, we didn't know about these specific roles in the M&A industry and so on. It would have been very helpful. So I hope this is useful for others, right? But for me, from a seller perspective, one important thing is to align all the shareholders, make sure that everybody is aligned with the intention of selling. Otherwise, you can enter into, you know, discussions that are a waste of time or a distraction. Well, the process itself can become a big distraction, even if everybody is aligned, because it's going to take a lot of work for many people. I think that Christopher said about hiring a finance person, I totally agree with that. Also, an M&A process can be very long, at least in my experience, more or less, but it's long. So I wouldn't assume that it's going to be a strike until it's completed, you know, until the very same day of signature. have been in, we have exited twice, but we have been involved in more opportunities. And also that there are several kinds of due diligences, you know. Some of them are deeper, some of them are more superficial, but all of them mean different levels of work, as we said earlier. And also another thing is that, and will sound obvious, probably, but I think you need good advisors with experience in the M&A industry. And also something to consider is that these advisors also obviously cost you money, and it's not cheap, and that you may not actually sell your company. So it's something, because some transactions failed, as I said. So it's something to take also into consideration. And also at a more personal level, something that needs to be clarified in the mind of the founders is, you know, what happens after the acquisition with them. What do we want to do after? You know, it's something that they need to have very clear in their minds. And also another thing that is a lot of work is to get the company integrated into the buyer. You know, so I think these are some of the things that.
Yeah, lots of good stuff there.
Yeah.
Romain, what about you?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm totally aligned with what said Shum, Christophe, and Jesus. Maybe one last point I can add is to really try to build long-term relationship in advance with publisher or potential buyers, because when you really want to launch your M&A process, trust will really make the difference to really ease everything, because they will know you, they will know your studio, so they can really accelerate the process and understand that, for example, on the finance side, you don't have everything, you know, but as they have built trust, they can move far quicker and allow to have fewer data than with companies that they've never heard about it and just bring by a private by a M&A banker.
Good stuff. And I see we've just been joined by Justin.
Sorry, everybody. The link that I had kept, I don't know, it's probably my Zoom, kept sending me to an old Zoom. Anyway, it's one of those, I feel like I'm presenting a game and everything went wrong, so apologies.
All right, we've all been there. This is great timing though. We're still on question number 1. Do you want to quickly just introduce yourself and your role, and then if you just want to answer, what do you think are the best practices to prepare a studio for M&A?
Sure, I'll go super quick since I'm late. Justin Berenbaum, VP Strategy and GM of Xsolla Funding Club. Hey, even got the background to work now. So super critical, I think, professionalism, and I'm sure I missed a bunch of the other things. I just, look, it's always about a great idea, but then it's supported by a great team, and then communicating the vision. I think so many times I see pitches that could be interesting that just aren't communicated clearly, and that's the thing that throws me off, right? From the very beginning, if I can't get inside somebody's head, I can't get the pitch.
Yep, solid. So we'll move on to the next one. So what are the biggest challenges faced during M&A period? Christopher, I'll throw it to you.
Just being organized and having all your materials together. You know, again, you know, having gone through quite a few processes, you know, I've had processes with bankers and without bankers. And I'm not saying this because Shum's a good friend of mine, but the difference is everything. When you have a banker there who can help organize the VDR, who can help get the team and prepare them with the questions that are there and prepare them with the materials and everything else, it is worth its weight in gold. I mean, it's going to save time and money for both sides to do it. And I know that, yeah, there are fees and all these sorts of things, but if you want a streamlined process and you want to be prepared, that's one of the important steps to take. And that's it.
Shum, do you want to take that? I feel like it's teed you up a little bit there.
Yeah, you did. I don't want to take too much, and kind of just be promoting, be sort of like self-promoting here. But I think look, there's a lot of pain points in the process. I think one thing that I would say, irrespective of what Chris mentioned, which is entirely valid, right, is the more prepared that you can be for a process, the better, right? So if all the sellers, as Jesus mentioned previously, are aligned, they know sort of roughly what kind of valuation is sort of their minimum threshold level, what kind of a deal structure they're looking for, what's a no-go and what isn't, what is attractive, what isn't, just at the outset, understanding and clarifying that at the outset, and having consensus, then already you're kind of a couple of steps ahead of what many studios haven't already accomplished. And then the process itself, it can be long, and it can take time. And a lot of that is a function of how prepared you are, how up to date your documents are. And sometimes it's not even in your hands. Sometimes the buyer's advisors or the buyer themselves are busy working on another transaction and just can't dedicate the adequate amount of time and resource to the process. So they're sort of dipping in and out, which can be frustrating. So then for a lot of the founders, especially who are the first time coming in, they'll get deal fatigue. And so this is where, again, if you have a banker, if you have an advisor that understands this, they can kind of help educate and say, look, this is common. This happens all the time. This is not them, sort of not giving you enough attention or TLC. It's just that they're busy or occupied on other deals. And it's just good to be that sort of cheerleader, if you will, and just kind of continue to shepherd the process to hopefully successful outcome.
Yeah, and just to really add on the back of that, and I apologize for cutting in. During the SPA, where I've seen things get really tricky is during SPA negotiations, and this is where you really have to manage your legal team, because so many times, lawyers want to and I apologize if I'm offending any lawyers, but they want to play who's the smartest in the room.
Never apologize for offending lawyers, by the way.
But I would say, on both sides, and this is again where a banker is going to come in handy, especially for the seller, is to really manage the legal team when you get to that point of negotiating an SPA.
With that and everything, would you say, are there any tips you think that a studio should be aware of that wouldn't come to mind in preparation for a studio takeover? Justin, do you want to answer this one?
Well, again, I'm going to have to defer most of this to the experts on this team. Most of the funding I'm looking at has been project-based with a little bit of equity. I think that there's always stuff that catches you, and as Shum said, it really is about preparation. It's understanding the process, knowing what you're looking for. I mean, it's like any deal, knowing what you're actually looking for, minimum threshold, all the common stuff. And I think one of the other uncommon things is really understanding the relationships between, if you have a banker or an advisor, the buyer, yourselves, and then even your team members, because it gets super stressful. And I think I've seen some deals fall apart just because the co-owners or founders end up disagreeing about stuff halfway through the process because of the pressure. So I think it's really about an alignment on the seller side before they even go engage an advisor or banker, because if they're not aligned, I feel like it's a marriage that there's no communication. Things fall apart really quickly, and then it can actually ruin a deal down the road because it makes your company look not professional. So I think that's one of the things, is just alignment of all the key stakeholders internally first. Yeah,
Romain, do you have any tips?
Yeah, just one thing. I think we should really understand that during the M&A process, the scarcest resource is the time. So everything, it's about preparation. If you have prepared all in advance, it will save you really like what you really need during this process. And last point regarding private M&A bankers, like support, because even if you have prepared everything in advance, it's a really stressful situation. So if you can have someone you can really rely on to help you on this really stressful topic, and most of the time, the first time you really meet this process, these questions, it will help you a lot to really make the deal happen.
Jesus, anything more?
I think that if the company is well organized with data, documentation, everything more or less organized, it's less work, but in any case, it's a lot of work, as it has been already said. So I think that the main point here, at least for me, is the huge amount of work that it can be. So rely on providers that support you during this process, and also I would, as been said already, I would rely also on increasing the internal finance and administration team. Yeah.
Good stuff. So what would you say are the main differences between an indie developer being taken over and a bigger company? Christopher, do you want to handle this one first?
I guess at the end of the day, it depends on who the acquirer is. Sometimes when companies are acquiring an indie developer, someone relatively small, most of the time it's a roll up into another studio that sits within a group company potentially, versus a larger company where it just may be a direct part of that group company. And with indie studios also, sometimes it might take a little more management. They may need more from the acquirer. But again, it also depends on the acquirer. You get someone like an Electronic Arts where they'll just sort of absorb you and then you do it the EA way. Or if you're bought up into someone like a Stillfront, you're going to be able to preserve your culture. You will have support of the other group companies. It just, at the end of the day, I guess it depends what, that selling company is looking for.
That makes sense. Shum, anything from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris made some good points there. I think the indie developer, it tends to be, again, usually you're going to have just a couple of founders. So it tends to be a much more emotional and to some extent life-changing outcome for them. So I think this is where the acquirer, again, and Chris alluded to Stillfront, but there's a lot of other acquirers out there, particularly in Europe, that are smaller, that have identified on how to preserve that independent culture, right? How to preserve and to seamlessly transition these companies into the fold, and so they usually follow a more sort of light touch approach as to what EA or some of the larger kind of traditional console acquirers would, which is a full harmonization. So from day one, you're no longer XYZ company, you're EA whatever, right? And you're implementing a new HR policy, a new company handbook, a new financial reporting system, a new accounting system, etc. And everything that you've worked for, which potentially could have been developed over many years, is just out the window. So I think, and again, I'm sorry to use them as an example, but I'm just, they're the big gorilla in the room. So yeah, I mean, I think with a bigger company, understanding the implications of integrating into a larger organization, you just have a lot more professional and middle and senior management to support those transitions very, much more easily. Whereas in an indie studio, it could get very sensitive very quickly.
Yeah, that's actually a good point about the indie studio, and the emotional transition can go through, because it's one of the questions somebody's actually written. How do you build that trust with them as they join the larger organization? I don't know if Justin or Romain, one of you?
Sure, I'll jump in real quick. Again, I think any of these deals, it becomes about trust ultimately, right? Somebody's taking a big bet, and you're taking a big bet with your career, your livelihood, the studio you've built. And sometimes people get blinded by the money, which is always a mistake, I think, because it ends up in bad deals. You end up having founders leave too soon, disappointed studios imploding. We've seen all of this. So I think understanding why you're looking to be acquired, who's acquiring you, what the outcome is going to be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year down the road. Are you just cashing out? Do you want to go? Does the leadership want to leave and go somewhere else? Do they not want to leave? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And so part of that then becomes like, who do I want to be acquired by, and what do I want to do after I get acquired? I mean, you can look at cases like PopCap, ages ago, and how they got offers tons of times, and they finally got bought out. And then pretty quickly, most of the founders left as soon as they basically cashed out, because they had no desire to be part of that big Borg organization. And then we've seen other organizations, some of the stuff Embracer's been doing, where those founders stick around for a long time, not only because of the way they're incentivized, but because they're still running their own ship. So I think it's super important to understand the expectations of the smaller studios, especially. The bigger studios, I think, already know what they're getting into for the most part, which sometimes is why Shum and his team and then bankers prefer them, because they're easier in some ways, and they're usually more prepared. So it really is, you have to know what you want going out of it and be prepared for stuff that you don't want, right? You get the money, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with the money.
No, that answers it very well. So just moving on slightly, just because I am conscious of time, and we have got a lot of questions. So how does a company's strategy change under new ownership? I'll go Jesus. I'll go to you first.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how does a company's strategy change under new ownership, if at all?
Yeah, well, it depends on the acquirer, of course. Sometimes I imagine they will buy the company for its pool of talent, sometimes because of their own project. So yeah, it really depends on the acquirer, really. But it's something that it's important that it is agreed upon, before the completing the transaction and making sure that everybody is aligned with the direction. I would say that.
Yeah, Romain, do you want anything to add to that?
No, fully, yes, I think everything should be discussed in advance. During the M&A process, you should really discuss what you want to implement in the future, what you want to build together, if you want to stay alone, or if you want to get merged between the bigger companies. I think all those questions need to be really get in detail to have the full commit of the team acquired and to get the most of the team, because at the end, it's you buy the future, you don't buy the past. And strategy, it's part of what you can build in the future. So if you have not a full alignment on it, it won't make a successful M&A.
Yeah, I would say that for the buyer as well. I mean, if there's anyone here on the buy side, take some time with founders, get to know each other a little bit. I mean, you want to see if your interests are aligned. Because, as you see some big companies, but many small companies, you have founders that really want to preserve culture. So really make sure that you know your acquirer, get to know them, see if your ideals and you're, culturally, there's good alignment there, because otherwise it'll unravel. And for buyers, beware of that. If you mess with the culture, you're playing with the one piece that is probably the single most important aspect of that company. And you're not buying a product, you're buying a team of people that have bought into a working methodology and a culture that they love. And when you play with that, you could lose all that talent.
Yeah, Justin, Shum, any more to add on? I just think we've covered that.
I think everybody.
We'll go for that one. That's all right. We've got a lot of questions coming in as well. So we'll answer another one of these while we've got time. Has anybody been part of a deal and then had it implode on them? And basically, where'd you go in a situation like this?
All the time.
I too many to count.
Can you give any examples? Obviously, I imagine not names, but
Well, I go.
I'll let Justin go first.
I got a couple examples. I don't want to name names just because, obviously, for obvious reasons. But it was a misalignment. Everybody loved the project. They initially loved the team, and then it came down. And this is, obviously, you ask the other side, they'd blame it on us. But it came down to what they decided they wanted, and what they were taking out of the company was not what we thought they were going to do. The co-founders and owners were really, instead of using the money to build the projects, they were paying themselves a significant amount of money, and we had no control over that once the deal was done. And because of that, basically, they ran out of money to finish the core projects that we were actually expecting them to finish. And then they kept coming back to us asking for more money, and it literally felt like I don't know, blackmail's the right word, but it definitely felt like we were stuck in a situation. And this is actually common with publishers. And so I know you hear a lot of complaints about developers on the publisher side, but on the publisher side, it happens all the time where you get left holding the bag when the developer does poor planning for budget, for release. So again, it goes back to what we talked about already. So there's numerous examples of deals falling apart on the publishing side and even on the investing side, including a couple of developers that literally within a year of making that deal, they pretty much self-imploded and they were out of business.
Yeah, no, that answers very well. Thank you. Okay, so a couple more just to take us home, I think. Are mergers and acquisitions a good thing for the games industry as a whole? Obviously, there's lots of concern from people. How many times have people referred to like Disney and a monopoly and these sort of things? Is it a good thing for the games industry? Romain, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think, yes, I really think it's a good thing for the industry for mostly 2 points. I think from financial perspective, it give more financial power to indie developer to really leverage their talent to build amazing products. And also it could help them on the technical side, because most of the time the acquirer will have more technical power, more tools, and it allows them the creative talent to really leverage these technical skills to build amazing product and to really build franchise and build really amazing stuff, which alone it would have been way more difficult to reach this milestone, I would say.
Krista?
Sorry, I'm having audio problems. Sorry, and you went in and out. What was the full question? I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay. Are mergers and acquisitions a good thing for the games industry?
Yeah, sorry. I would say absolutely for a variety of reasons. But it also depends, right? I mean, you know, I think companies just getting gobbled up by really large corporations, and I don't mean to EA bash, but you know, you have the EAs of the world just sort of buying up companies, and then they pretty much become a product factory. You know, I view mergers and acquisitions as a way for companies to collectively pool their talent together to find a way to leverage their respective talents to learn and evolve and help each other scale overall. You see this in Stillfront, you see this in Embracer, you see this in MTG and EG7. And I think that's a very healthy thing, especially as we're trying to figure out how to evolve the industry overall, make new technological leaps, make new leaps in how we entertain people.
Jesus, anything from you?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it could be a bad thing, honestly. Well, you mentioned that maybe some corporations could become too big, but I don't see that we are there yet, honestly.
Shum, Justin, any more?
I mean, I'll add a couple of just really one main point. I mean, the industry traditionally has always been really cyclical. You'd have these periods of peaks and valleys, right? When you'd have a 2-3 year cycle of a lot of M&A, and then scorched earth, right? Nothing occurring. You know, I mean, it's like a desert. But I think right now, just given the sheer amount of interest from a lot of other ancillary industries, investors, private equity firms, etc., you're seeing this unprecedented consolidation wave. And, you know, I read somewhere 60 billion worth of transactions this year, which is just absolutely insane. So, I mean, the thing that worries me is that, you know, a lot of smaller indie developers are going to get on this train to say, hey, am I missing this moment? Do I have to do a deal because, you know, my peers are all, you know, joining these other larger players. And there is, you know, I mean, I think everybody's expressed some pretty good points here, the strategic rationale, synergies, the functional areas of expertise that they might be lacking in, et cetera. So all of that makes sense. But I think one of the last reasons, if you're an indie developer or a smaller developer, is to do an M&A deal simply because your peers are doing it. There should be a real concerted, defined reason why you're doing it. And you've established, I think we've talked about these themes previously, trust, a relationship, a rapport, and even a post-closing strategy on how you can achieve together something bigger. So I think that's kind of more my point.
Yeah, Justin, anything from your perspective?
No, I think that everybody else summed it up. I think, you know, and I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to say which company, but one of my friends' companies was Embraced, and he basically said, for lack of a better, he'd been running the company studio for quite some time. You know, he's gone up and down between, you know, when it started 12 employees up to several hundred, like 100 or so, and then somewhere in between. And he, you know, in addition to the extra resources that everybody talked about, the idea of not stressing every single month about keeping his people employed and paid was actually, after more than a decade of this, was one of the biggest reasons for him to do this. Is like, I can now focus on building content, building the teams, building the studio, and I don't have to focus on, oh my God, am I going to be able to keep all my employees next week? So there's, and by the way, I mean, the studio is fairly successful, but it's just that stress over the last decade or so, you know, aged him significantly, and the idea of not being able to worry about that. So there are some additional reasons beyond just cashing out, right? I want to keep the studio going. I want to focus on creative. I'm tired of being the professional manager of the studio and trying to build the studio and run games. And I have a couple other friends that have made exits from smaller studios and or smaller publishers. That's actually been another reason. But there was also the fact that there were the synergies of getting all these other resources, scaling up, and being able to do things. So I think that's, again, it goes back to preparation. What do you really want? And I always say, what do you want now? What do you want 2 years from now? And where do you want to be 5 years? And if you don't answer that before you go into the negotiation, you're going to probably end up disappointed when you come out.
Yeah, no, mostly positive as well. I see from that feedback, which is interesting. Okay, I think we've got time. Maybe we can get a couple questions answered, if not at least one more. Okay, so this one's quite interesting. How do you feel about the roll-up strategy now happening in Sweden, where we see a lot of studios being allowed to remain independent, and the larger company is now just a holding company? Anybody fancy this?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I think it's a clever idea, and I talked about the preservation of culture and working methodologies. I would say, some companies are more hands-off than others. It's not just Sweden. I think Tencent is quite a bit like that. But I would say what you want to do, and I think Stillfront has been probably the most clever in this, is how they bring those operational synergies to a group company like that. It's great to preserve the culture. It's great to have that independence, but at the same time, you want something more than just additional investment from the group. You want some operational synergies, like whether it's a common IT infrastructure that's just going to streamline everything for everybody else, a common financial infrastructure that's going to streamline everything for each other, potentially common data dashboards so you can get a group effect on what your audience is like. And there are a variety of other things on how the companies can work together to leverage talent. Some companies have a hard time finding talent, but then you can find within a group structure like that there is additional talent you could tap into. So I think it's been a really good thing, and it's certainly changed the way people have viewed how you acquire companies and what that acquisition actually means, both on the buy side and the sell side.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I think that's it very well. Okay, so just take us on then. I'm just going to go around everyone. So what advice would you give to companies that are looking to make an acquisition or to be acquired, and what are the positives for both parties? It's just so if we just go around everyone, if you want to do a cheeky plug for yourself as well, just where people can find you, that'd be great. Jesus, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, no, I just want to give a quick advice about, from the seller perspective. I don't want to sound greedy, but one of the things that are very important to do when you plan to sell your company is to optimize the tax structure of the deal. I mean, otherwise you can lose a huge percentage of the money. I mean, it's great to pay taxes, being able to do so, but you have to pay what you have to pay, no more than necessary, ideally. That's one thing that I would seek advice for that.
Where can people find you, Jesus?
Yeah, they can ask me on LinkedIn, no problem.
Yeah, are you on social media or anything?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, yeah. Twitter, LinkedIn, yeah, you can find me there.
Okay, fantastic. Shum?
Let's see. I think from a seller perspective, and we've kept talking about the theme, so I don't want to regurgitate it too much, but I think, again, if you can be really aligned, exactly what you want going in terms of valuation and deal structure, if you have your finances in order, if you want to work with an advisor or not, I mean, all of these things I think are really beneficial. From an acquirer perspective, I would say what I find with a lot of acquirers is sometimes they're just following the herd. So there might be a couple of players like a Stillfront or Embracer who've been super aggressive, and then there's a lot of kind of fast followers, let's call them that. And so I think, you really need to define yourself. What are you going to do? I mean, are you going to be a mobile free-to-play acquirer, or are you going to have a particular genre focus or category focus? Maybe a geography, maybe it's a certain size of studio you're acquiring. So I think it goes both ways. And I think the more narrow, more focused of the buyer is, the more actual synergy that buyer can offer than the targets that they're looking for, because they've also defined themselves as a very clear, clear-cut strategy. So I think, when you have, in my experience, when you have a buyer who has a very clear idea of what they want to do and a seller knows what they want to do, those are usually the transactions that are going to succeed or have the highest probability of success after completion.
Cool, thank you. Where can people find you, Shum?
You can visit agnitiocapital.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Yeah.
No Twitter?
No Twitter.
No Twitter. No, nobody's on Twitter apart from me, apparently. So, Justin.
Well, I am on Twitter, but I'll get to that in a minute. That's a whole long story. I think so. One of the things that we talked about from a seller perspective, but it also goes for the buyer. What are the economies of scale that are generated by working with this organization? So we talked about access to resources. Is it access to an engine, a proprietary engine? Do they have an overarching deal with Unity, Unreal? Can that be brought to the table to reduce your costs? And that's a huge piece for me. And then honestly, why are you taking the money? Is it going to accelerate your growth? Are you just tired and going to cash out? Are you going to use that to really ramp up a game that you think could be super successful but hasn't? So I think understanding why is it that you're taking the money is a super important piece. And then Shum covered it really well. From a buyer's perspective, I think the more focused the buyer is on why they want to acquire something, and the more easy or more readily it's available to figure out what the synergies are and what the long-term value is going to be. And again, I am on Twitter. Almost all my handles are at SC Slug. So that's Santa Cruz Slug. That's where I went to school. So it should be easy to track down.
Good stuff. Romain?
Yep. Yes, I think on both sides, the key will be on people. So we talk a lot about it. I think we on both sides, you really work to work really hard to really understand each perspective and be 100% sure you're aligned on the next step. I think it could be as my advice on this on both sides. And regarding Homa Games, so we are on TikTok, which we are we are yes everywhere. Because yes, we are both on consumer and on studio, so it's important for us to have a global footprint, I would say. So yes, I will be happy to meet each of you after this meeting.
Great stuff. And Christopher, take us on.
Okay, so I would say on the buy side, I agree with Shum. Really get your strategy in order. This is super critical, but I would say, part of that strategy, we really look at where your core competencies are and kind of build from there. I always view M&A as a way to sort of extend that knowledge base, meet somewhere in the middle where you each have a little bit of knowledge in a similar area. So, if you're a PC console company, don't make your first acquisition a mobile company. Maybe buy a cross-platform game company to where you can talk the same language about some things, but then there are areas you can both learn from. And then on the seller side, I can't emphasize enough, and I think we've said this over and over again, just, have your materials prepared, your finances, your corporate documents, everything else. Get the right team around you to help prepare that. And that's it. I think we've said it all. And for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. TikTok, you can find via my daughter, because there's a variety of me things doing with her dances and imitating her. I don't have an account. It's just hers. But that's it.
Good stuff. Yeah.
I want to throw one thing out. So just real quickly, a word of advice to anybody who watches this. If you're reaching out to anybody on this panel, and I'm sure we're all open to it, provide context. Say, hey, I watched your panel here, or, you said something here. And the big reason for that, frankly, is all of us probably get more requests on LinkedIn than we can handle. And a lot of times it's from companies we have no reason to talk to. They're, trying to sell us art services or whatever else. And I'm pretty sure everybody on here will take any of those requests as long as there's some context. So anytime you're reaching out to somebody, especially somebody you don't know personally, provide the context, and it just makes it much easier to get a quick response.
Great advice. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Very good advice all around there. Very useful panel. I hope participants have found it useful. Yes, so I've been Matthew Forde. You can find me at MattForde64 on Twitter. I'm not on TikTok, but I'm on LinkedIn and other stuff. But you want to contact these guys anyway. They know much more than me. Yeah, and thanks again. And I'll hand it back over to Kai.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I'm going to check out the TikTok, Christopher. Thank you so much for this very insightful panel. Really appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys eventually at one of the upcoming events that are hopefully going to start happening again. So thank you so much for your time and all the insights.